Alrighty. Is everyone able to hear me okay and see my screen share coming through? Awesome. Thank you for that head nod there. Appreciate that. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. My name is Eden Snyder, and I'm the implementation consultant who is working with kind of James and Ben and Kate on implementing your agenda and meeting management select product. You'll probably still see it called CivicClerk in a few different places. So if you ever hear it referred to as CivicClerk or AMM Select or just Select, just know that they're kind of all in the same. I do like to kind of mention that just because that can be a little confusing. Within the last year, a lot of our products have gone through a rebrand. So Select is its actual name, but as you can see, even within the system, we still have it listed out as CivicClerk. So just know that they are kind of all in this one and the same there. For those of you who have been on any of the previous trainings that we have had, some of today's training may be a little bit redundant. The purpose of today's training would be to train our standard users on essentially how to access the system for the first time and then access agendas to add items. So a little bit simpler training than, say, the agenda manager training, if any of you have been on that previously. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. I do run my trainings pretty casually, so if you guys have any questions throughout the training, please feel free to unmute and interrupt me. I do my best to keep an eye on the chat, but just because I am looking at so many monitors, sometimes that's easy for me to miss. So if someone says something in the chat and I haven't addressed it, please feel free to unmute and just interrupt me. I'm happy to answer questions. Alrighty, so as far as getting into the system for the first time, kind of the first thing to note is that the system is entirely cloud-based. So you'll be able to access your system from anywhere that you can access a web browser. And I will go ahead and drop the URL in the chat here. So you can go ahead and bookmark that for ease of use. Your custom URL is brooklinema.v8.civicclerk.com. I know we've added in a handful of users here, and I'll confirm with James if we do need to add any additional users in. So if you do attempt to log in, just note that if you get something saying your account's not active, we may just need to add some additional users in, but we'll confirm that at the end of our call today. When you are accessing it for the first time, I'll kind of show you what that looks like just in an incognito browser here. It's going to be a login page that's pretty basic. It just says Civic Plus on it. Give that a second here. Is that my internet, or give me 1 second here. I'm going to remove this My Clerk at the end. Maybe that's my problem. There we go. So when you get to the page for the first time, it's going to be a login screen that looks a little bit like this. You'll enter in your work email address and select continue. On that next page, there's going to be a password box that populates, but there will also be a forgot password option. Now, there's a couple of different ways this might go. If you're someone who already has access to your Civic Plus website, it may log you in automatically with those credentials because they do share credentials between Select and your website. But if that doesn't work, you can always follow through that forgot password option. So usually users don't run into a lot of issues getting into the system for the first time, but just a couple of different options might happen there, just depending on the level of access that you already have to Civic Plus products. So when in doubt, use that forgot password option, but you may also just be able to use your website credentials to get in for the first time, as long as we've added you into the select system. So that's kind of what that will look like. The last thing I like to touch on is that we do send out an email when we add new users into the system. So I'll just show you a quick screenshot of what that looks like, as it can come across a little spammy. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it doesn't really list clerk or select or anything. It just says Civic Plus. And then it says, thank you for signing up for a new account. We know you didn't do that. You know, your administrators or myself, I've added you in. So it just, to me, seems like a little bit like it might be a fake email or a phishing email. So I like to just show a screenshot. It is a valid email coming from a no reply with Civic Plus. So you can also attempt to use the link within that email, but it does expire in about 6 minutes. So typically by the time it either makes it through kind of a quarantine or your junk email, or by the time you get around to the email, it has probably expired. So I just like to let you know you'll probably receive this email, but my recommendation for accessing the system for the first time is always just going to be go directly to the URL and kind of follow through those steps I've mentioned. All right. So once you do get logged into the system, where you're going to go is to the dashboard. This is kind of functions as the home page. It's the page that it takes you to right as you're logged in. And what you can see on the dashboard are really just items directly related to you as the user that's signed in. So really customized. As you can see, it's saying I have a few items that I've been working on agendas just because I have been in the system with the project team doing testing and working with you all in training. So it's showing that I do have a few things that I'm working on. So it kind of gives you some insight into what that might look like. Before I show you where to navigate to access the agendas, I do like to point out a couple of tools that will be available to you as a standard user within the system. The first I want to point out is the little button that almost looks like a Rubik's Cube in the top right-hand corner. This is our Civic Plus application switcher, so you can easily switch over to your website if you want to. So that's a really helpful tool for some of our multi-product clients. Gives you the opportunity to just kind of seamlessly switch between them there. Just next to that, we have the little yellow dot. It currently says ES. Those are my initials. So when you're logged in, it will, of course, have your initials. So if we click into that, really the only thing I want to call attention to in here is that you can access our help center directly from within the system. So this can be particularly helpful if maybe you are doing some testing from what we talk about in today's training. Maybe you don't want to comb through the whole recording that we have for you. And you just want to maybe search some keywords and kind of follow along, make sure you're remembering how to do things correctly. So maybe we want to just kind of gut check that we remembered how to like create an item, an agenda item. Once you start to enter in some keywords, it's going to start to populate some articles based on those keywords. So it's going to give you some options, and you'll just kind of narrow it down to the article that seems like it might make the most sense. So create or add an agenda item. That's probably what I'm looking for. And then when we click into the article, it's going to show us a few different learning tools. At the very top, there is a click-through tutorial. There's some instructions on the right-hand side, and then it'll just show you where to click to do what you're looking for. So kind of a learn by doing process, which can be beneficial for some learners. If you'd rather just kind of scroll and follow along, you can also scroll down and use just the screenshots and numbered instructions. So a couple of different tools just based on what you're more comfortable with or what works better for your learning style. So when I was onboarding, I was in the help center very regularly. I can speak, the articles are very well fleshed out and there's a lot of really helpful tools in there. So I hope you guys are able to lean on this as a tool to help you get comfortable with the system here while we're onboarding. All right, so I'm going to close out of that. And then again, that was just available from within that user menu drop down here under Help Center. So give you access to that. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the tabs over on the left-hand side, and this is how you're going to actually access those agendas to be able to add an agenda item. So as I mentioned, that top tab is going to be the dashboard or the home page. That's kind of where it lands when you log in. The meetings tab just beneath that, this is where all of your agendas live within the system. So when you're coming into the system to add an agenda item, of course, what you're going to want to do is navigate to that meetings tab. Having a little bit of slowness, I'm wondering if because I logged into your system a little bit before training, if it's logging me out. There we go. If it continues to be slow, I might force a log out and log myself back in here, but seems to be working for the time being. So as you can see, when I click over to the meetings tab, we have a couple of agendas that are available to me. So one thing I like to note on this page is that your view may be a little different from someone else that you work with's view. And that might just be because of what agendas or meeting types you have access to. So maybe you're someone who really only needs to add items to the select board, but maybe you're someone who adds items to the transportation board. So we are able to limit access based on the meeting types that you need access to, which does make the system a little bit easier for you to navigate, not having to look at agendas that you don't really need access to. So don't stress out too much if there's certain agendas that you can't see. As long as we have your access levels set up correctly, we should be good to go there. What we're looking at again is just kind of showing some of those agendas that we have available to us. At the top, there are some ways for us to filter down to find what you're looking for. As you can imagine, once you start to populate a lot of agendas as we're working in the system, this will kind of start to fill up. So there is a card view is kind of the standard view, which I do prefer how it looks at least. But once you start to see a lot of agendas here, you may want to click over to that list view, which will then kind of list them out. So you may be able to just see a little bit more of what's going on. You can also filter down based on kind of a time frame. So maybe you're looking for a previous agenda in the last 30 days or the next 30 days. You can search in a custom date range. And then you can also filter down by meeting type. So maybe you're only looking for transportation board, or maybe you're looking for, commission for diversity, whatever meeting type you're looking for. A few different filtering options to make it a little bit easier on you. Now, the other two tabs over here, I'm not going to click into them just because as a standard user, you won't be able to access them. They're more for your agenda managers. But just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, the events tab is where your agenda managers will access the system to create events, which is essentially scheduling the meeting. Then they create an agenda to link to that meeting. So it's kind of a two-part process for them. And then the analytics tab is where they'll be able to pull various reports from the system. So typically that is a level of access reserved for agenda managers, but you're always welcome to work with them to, if you are looking for a certain data set, maybe you want to see the number of, items your department has put on agendas for the year, motion votes made by a specific board or council member. A lot of different great reports that can be pulled, and it definitely becomes more useful the longer you use the system and the more data is in there. All right, so let's just kind of stay on this meetings tab here, which again is going to be where you navigate to access your agendas and meeting materials. I'm going to go ahead and select this user training agenda for the one for today. I did go ahead and create this so that if you do get into the system to do some testing, you're more than welcome to use this one to practice adding items to, whatever might work best for you. So a couple of things before I click into it, just giving you an overview of the card here. At the very top, it's going to list the name of the agenda. More than likely, a lot of them are going to have very similar names because it is going to be something along the lines of select board regular agenda or something like that. I differentiate a little bit more with my trainings just so you can see when they were created. So really what you're going to want to pay attention to more is the date, because that's going to be the date of the meeting. So you'll kind of have an idea of what meeting you're wanting to add that item onto based on the date. Down below, we have our agenda packet in minutes, just kind of listing out those meeting materials. A good example is the agenda manager training agenda, where we had actually published the agenda and packet to the public portal. So that's what it'll look like once your materials are published to the public. Since this is a new agenda, we haven't published anything, so this is what it would look like. Down at the bottom, we have a cutoff date in the bottom left corner. This is an important typically this is not going to show today. It would be like 15 days from now or whatever it would be. The cutoff date is essentially a due date that your agenda managers have selected to make sure you have your agenda items submitted by. So essentially you're just going to want to pay close attention to that to make sure you can get your items submitted prior to that cutoff date. And after the training today, I will push this out. So if you do want to get in and practice on this agenda, you won't be cut off from doing so. So I'll push that out about a month so you guys have some time with this agenda. And then of course there's a little countdown showing when that meeting is happening. So today this one is scheduled for, today's date. So it's showing that the meeting is today. So just a couple of tools, points of reference on this card here. So let's go ahead and click into the actual agenda and walk through how you're able to add an item. So when you click into the agenda, the first thing I like to point out are some points of reference that you can utilize to make sure you're in the right place. As a newer member of our implementation consultant team, I can empathize with the fact that a lot of the pages within the system do look the same. There's lots of purple, lots of gray, same fonts used everywhere. So I was always looking for areas to just confirm I'm in the right place. So there were kind of two places that I use a lot. So this top left corner, the system uses a lot of breadcrumbs. So there's always going to be kind of a path for where we are within the system up in this top left corner. So, we're on the meetings tab, we're on an agenda. This is the name of the agenda. So that can be helpful just as kind of a point of reference. The other is the status bar over here on the right-hand side. This is going to tell you the date of the meeting. So this can be another helpful tool to make sure you're on the right select board meeting or whatever, committee or commission that you're supposed to be on. Tell you what meeting type it is. So if you're not supposed to be on the select board and you meant to be on another board meeting, you can absolutely just double check there, make sure you're in the right place. Now, if you're on a smaller monitor, this can kind of take up a lot of space. So you can also collapse that away if it's more helpful for you as you're working in the system. What we're looking at over here is essentially the default sections and items on this agenda. So we have a purview into absolutely everything. Of course, we are able to limit access to agenda items as well. So another area of the system where what you're able to see may vary from someone else that you work with. Maybe you only have access to your department items. That's totally fine as long as you have access to what you need access to. Don't stress out too much if the view is a little bit different. So when you're ready to add an item, what you're going to do is go up to this green, it's a gray button, but it has green create on it. And this is going to be where you'll go to create your item. So I'm going to go ahead and select item. And we're going to have a little pop-up that's going to show up for us to start to kind of define and populate this item we're wanting to add to the agenda. So at the top, it's going to just tell you what agenda you're on. It's not something you can change, but just use it as a gut check. Make sure you're in the right place. Where it says sections and items, this is where you're determining where on the agenda do you want it to be placed. So if you want it in the miscellaneous section, you would select miscellaneous. If you want it in announcements and updates, you can select that section. Your agenda managers always have the ability to rearrange and move the items on the agenda. So if it gets put in the wrong spot, don't worry too much. If you do select an item rather than a section, it will nestle itself as a sub item. So that's just important to know. Whatever you select is what it's going to be nestled under, and that includes sections or items. So for today, I'm just going to go ahead and select announcements here. We'll put it under announcements and updates. Now, agenda item name, this is exactly how it's going to appear on the agenda itself. So this is where you're going to want to kind of place the name. If you can kind of see in the grayed out background where it says approval of meeting minutes from date, and you'd enter the date there, that's exactly how it's going to display verbiage wise, like the text that's going to display. So that's what would go in this box. So I'm going to go ahead and just call it test item name. The important thing to note here is I know it is really common to be kind of copying and pasting, maybe from other documents or from an email, a report, contract, whatever it might be. And you're more than welcome to do so. But what I recommend is that we paste as plain text. So if you right click in this box and use this paste as plain text option, you can also use the keyboard shortcut. If shortcuts are something you're comfortable with, you can use Control-Shift-V. That's going to remove any of the text formatting. So, different fonts, font sizes, bolding, underlining. It's going to remove all of that so that what you're inserting into here is plain text. Now, the reason that that's important is that we've worked really closely to apply an actual design to the agenda so everything can be really consistent and clean across the board. And so the goal is that no additional formatting would be added into this space. Now, let's say you accidentally notice that you did carry some formatting over. It looks like name is bolded. We do have a backup option for you. In the top row here, this third button from the left, it looks a little bit like a Post-it note in my opinion. It says convert to plain text when you click on it. You can also utilize that to remove any additional formatting. And then the last tool, it's not in everybody's skill set, but if it is, there is also a code view available to you that you could use to double check that. So a few different options just to kind of make sure that that text is plain. If you ever look at a preview of the agenda and it looks like something's has a little bit different formatting, probably means some formatting got carried across here. So easy to know where to go to change that. Any questions on that before I move on to the kind of next row of options? Alrighty. So next up, we have item category. The 4 item categories that we currently have in the system are just the system's sort of base item categories. We can add additional ones into here. So by the time the system goes live, you may see these categories change. But just ultimately note that the item category is meant for you to select essentially a bucket where you could categorize the item. So what is this item like? Is it a resolution? Is it an action item? An ordinance, presentation, so on and so forth. Really just kind of categorizing it. It can be used for reporting purposes. It can also be used for approval workflows if that's something that we ever do implement within the system for you. So if, say resolutions have to go through the same approval workflow before they're added to the agenda, this could assign that. But for the standard user, you're really just looking for, what category does this item kind of fall into? Under department, this is going to automatically fill in with the name of the department who is of the user who's logged in. So since I'm the one who's logged into the system, it's saying Civic plus admin department. Of course, that's not going to show within your system. You can click into here to see the other departments that we've added in, and you can always change that to another department. I would say most of the time it's probably going to stay the department that's tied to your profile since you're typically adding items for your department. The important thing to note here is just that if you are someone who only has access to your department's items and you select a department that is maybe one you don't have access to, as soon as you click create item, you're going to lose access to the item to further define it. So you just want to make sure that you didn't misclick, make sure that the department is accurate before you move on. The item ID, this is just an internal kind of run-of-the-mill system-generated item ID. If you happen to change it, it's not going to break anything within the system, but it also won't do anything particularly beneficial for you. So we typically just recommend kind of leaving that alone, just kind of the system's way of tracking the item internally. All right, and then our last section down here is about adding attachments. You are able to upload attachments to items, supporting documentation, things like that. So I'm going to click into this box to have our little window pop up. While I'm doing this, the one thing I like to note is that it's pretty robust as far as what documents and file types you're able to upload. The only types of attachments that you cannot add to an item are video and audio. So anything else, pretty much like a PowerPoint, any image documents, Word documents, PDFs, it's pretty, like I said, pretty robust as far as what you can upload. So it's just video and audio are the only things that you wouldn't be able to upload to an item. So once we have those selected, you can confirm whether or not the item is confidential. Now, the confidentiality is essentially just triggering a level of access to this attachment. So if you are a municipality who does have often confidential attachments, essentially what the admins of your system or agenda managers can do is create a list of users who are allowed to have access to confidential items. So this is basically just indicating whether or not this is a confidential attachment. So sometimes that list of users might be members of your select board. Maybe it's a list of internal employees who should have access to confidential items. So that's a kind of a conversation to have internally about whether or not you're using confidential items, but that's just kind of showing you what that indicator is. So I'll leave this as non-confidential for now so we can show you what that'll look like. Where it says show link on public portal, this is indicating whether or not you'd like this included in the packet on the public portal, and then there will be a link there for the public to access it. So I'll just leave that as yes. And then the last thing that kind of pops up here for the attachments is the opportunity for you to rename the item. And the reason for that is in your public portal, when it lists out your attachments, rather than it just being kind of a jumble of letters and numbers or whatever your document is sometimes named, it's not always super straightforward. It's going to list whatever you put here, so it's a little bit easier for the public to understand. Let's change that to one to plan. There we go. Any questions on any of these fields before I move forward into kind of further defining the item and getting it created? All righty.
Actually, I did have one brief question.
Oh yeah, of course.
Will you show us what this is going to look like from the public facing?
We don't go into that today, but if we do have time, I could publish something so that I could show you what that looks like. That's typically not in the, but I'm happy to do that. Thanks for
Okay,
bringing that up, Lisa.
thanks.
Alrighty, so what we have here now is whenever we create an item, it's going to take you into the item where we can kind of further define it. So we have those initial fields filled out. A lot of it is going to automatically fill in, but this is just showing you what it would look like if you needed to make edits. So of course, it's showing the item name that we gave it. You could always change that if needed. It's showing you the item category we selected as well as the department. And then what you're going to notice is there are a couple of additional fields here that are blank. These are fields that we've kind of come up with that are tied to your item report, which is essentially the cover sheet that goes in the packet for the item. So from here, what you would want to do is select a presenter. So I'll just go ahead and select someone random here. Jed got lucky. Jed, you're going to be our presenter today. Down here in other details, we do have item background. This is just where you could put some additional information about the background of the item, whatever you're wanting to share on that cover sheet or item report. So this is a sample sentence. This is a fillable field. So I'll just kind of put some, basic text in there so that we can kind of see what that looks like here. I'll just kind of put a little bit in so we can show how that displays. Now, you'll notice that as soon as I started to make changes to this page, this little pink box showed up that's indicating we have unsaved changes. So before we navigate to any other pages within the system, we are going to just want to go ahead and save. Get in the habit of saving as you're working. Definitely a good habit to have rather than having to break it later on if it's a bad habit you develop. So we've got our item kind of defined. We have all of those fields filled out. Now, the next thing I want to point out is that whenever there is a page that has this little view drop down here, so it's like a gray box with orange text, it's indicating that we have some additional pages to take a look at to continue to work on the item. So we just filled out all of the fields on the item fields page. So next we're going to navigate down to the item files page. So from here, you can see that we already have those two attachments uploaded that we uploaded when we initially created the item. You can also always add attachments from here. So if you go to create the item and you don't have your attachments ready to go, that's totally fine. You can skip that step on that first page and just do it here from this item files page. You can edit the order of the attachments if needed. The reason that that's important to call attention to is that the order they're listed here is the order they're going to display in the packet. So, maybe we want the fire escape plan before the map so that they can kind of have the text context before they see the visual. So whatever order you want those to be in. Now, as we move up to the top here, this is where the system is going to generate item reports for us. Item reports function as kind of a cover sheet for the item. So whatever we generate here is going to come before these attachments in the packet. We do have a design created for an item report for you. So to generate one of those, what we're going to do is go to create/upload report. We're going to give it a name. So I'll just go test item report for today so we can see what that looks like. Now, it looks like there's a lot of options to select, but when you click into these boxes, there's only going to be one available in each. So that makes that really easy for you. And then you're going to select include in packet to make sure that this does get included in the packet. So I'm going to go ahead and select create file here. Before I do that, I do like to note that you are able to upload item reports as well. So if you have a cover sheet for an item that's different than what's in the system, that is a system capability. But of course, I want to show you how to generate one using the design we've created. So I'm going to click create file here. And now we can see that that test item report, which is what I named it, is listed here under our reports. You'll notice that the files column is blank. That just means we haven't actually generated it. So think of it as once you do that create/upload process and it's listed here, you've told the system that you want to create an item report. We just haven't generated the actual files. So to do that, if you wanted to maybe download them and save them externally or just have access to it prior to the packet being created, you can click this little green generate button right here. And then what that is going to do is generate actual files that you'll be able to download from the system. Thanks for your patience while that's loading here. All right, I'm gonna, rather than waiting for that to load and give it 5 more seconds here, and then I'm gonna force a log out and log myself back in. I think a lot of times when I'm in and out of so many different systems throughout the day and throughout the week, I think our single sign-on for Civic Plus, I think, gets a little confused about what's going on. Yep,
All
and I
right.
was. Go ahead.
I said that's
Oh, hi,
perfectly all
James.
right. Yeah. All right. Been here since about 5 minutes after you started.
No worries. Luckily, what we covered today, most of it was covered in that first training you were in with us as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all righty, let's get back into the system here. All right, let's get back into our agenda. All right, so it did generate those, just took a second there. All righty. Let me reshare there. All right, so as you can see, those files have now generated. So now you would be able to download a PDF version of that cover sheet or item report, as well as a Word version. Now I'll just show you a quick preview of what it looks like using the little eyeball button over here. I apologize. I am not sure. Usually logging out and logging back in kind of takes care of some of this slowness. So I am not sure what's going on. If any of you do get into the system to do some testing and if you encounter any slowness, please let me know so I can report that to our product team. That's always helpful for us for, yeah, see, I'm not sure. Let me try this one more time.
not something I assume that you're seeing standard across a bunch of different implementations.
No, I had a little slowness in one training yesterday, but it hasn't been super standard, no.
Okay.
But I still like to know just in case it is something with the system. That's why I ask. Okay. All right. Well, I am going to download one of these. Maybe. Come on now.
Eden, what if James were to try to drive?
You could
Yeah,
start.
happy to do it. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, if you want to, you certainly can. I can also try to log out here one more time and see if that's the issue. I apologize. I'm like a little embarrassed. I'm not sure what is going on here.
It's all right. It happens.
Yeah, just really just a few more steps as far as kind of the item creation goes. If you do want to try that out, and I can try to get back in here, and if I get it working, then I can take back over. Let me see if I can.
Give me 1 second. I'll log into system.
I'm also trying to log back in here. I did get booted again when I closed my browser and reopened it, so I'm not sure if it might be an issue with our SSO, our single sign-on, because that's pretty unusual. Usually I just have to log in a couple times during the day, not twice in 5 minutes. Okay, looks like things are loading a little bit quicker for me. So if you want to just kind of be like at the ready, James, I can try to jump
Yeah.
back in here and then we'll just kind of see what happens.
Okay.
All
I
right.
got your
So
backup then.
perfect. I was able to get that item report to load for us. So just kind of showing, this was that kind of sample text that I had inserted. When I selected the presenter, that was Jed. So that name inserted there. So maybe we update that field from presenter to maybe from on the cover letter, something that maybe makes a little more sense to the users. But just kind of showing you where those fields do autofill in. So basically, this prevents you from having to create a cover sheet outside of the system. And it's just going to autofill for you based on what you put in those fields. So any questions on kind of how that works? Alrighty. So next I want to just touch on a few of these last couple of items here. So the item timeline, this is really just going to give you an overview of the lifespan of the item. So it gives you some transparency as far as who created it, who provided the attachments, any changes that have been made just sort of gives you some insight into that. Now, item approvals, I'll click on this page. I know we're not setting up approvals right away. As a standard user, the only thing you would need to know about this is that if approvals ever do get set up in the system, this page would list out the approvers. And the only thing you would have to do as a user would be select start approvals. Now, since there aren't really going to be approval processes set up right now, you wouldn't really need to click that start approvals button since it's just going to be kind of added to the agenda right away. So those are kind of the caveats since we aren't setting up those approval workflows, but just to kind of give you some insight into what this page is.
Yeah, to be clear, folks, we may at some point start using this system to also approve items on agendas. For now, we decided that was too complicated as we're just getting started. So I would not worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last page within items is item tasks. This is a totally optional feature. What you can do is if you have a task you want to assign to somebody regarding this item, an example I can often think of is maybe you've got the item fields all filled out, you have the cover sheet ready to go, but maybe you just need someone else to upload a specific document. Maybe someone has a contract or some financial documents, whatever that might be. You could basically assign a task to them. So, select new, let's go with like medium priority. You can select a user to assign it to. You can give that user a deadline for getting the task done. The notify field basically works as the same as like copying someone on an email, where you're keeping them looped in, but they don't necessarily need to take any action. So this would send them an email letting them know that, you know, this task was assigned to this person, here's the update on it, that kind of thing. Maybe the title would be like supporting docs. And then you could go into like, can you upload that financial document, whatever that might be, kind of just giving them an assignment. And then when you select add task, I won't do it because I don't want to bombard everybody, but when you select add task, it would just list it out here, and then that user could come in and modify whether it's in progress or been updated. And really, it just provides a level of transparency so that if someone logs in and is looking at the item, they notice that attachment isn't there, they would be able to see in the tasks that someone is working on it. So use it as much as is helpful for you. Some customers get really excited about that, and others already have project management tools or organizational tools they're using for things like that. So again, just use it as much as is helpful for you. Now I'm going to navigate back to the item fields page just so we have like a good idea of where we are within the system, but note that this is available from anywhere within the item. The last couple of things I want to touch on are within this actions dropdown. So this is kind of a quick action tool that you can use when you're working on an item to do a few different things. The first thing I want to show is that you can preview the item. Now what this is going to show you is the cover sheet along with the attachments. So it's going to show you essentially the portion of the agenda packet that is tied to just this item. So just kind of gives you some insight into what that's going to look like, double check that it looks good. The other two items I want to talk about within here are the copy tool and the move tool. Now I'll start with copy. So copy is essentially going to allow you to copy and paste this item from this agenda to another. So maybe you know that the item you're adding is going to be talked about at 2 consecutive meetings. Basically, instead of having to create that item on both agendas, you can create it once and then copy it to that other agenda. So at the very top, we would select the agenda. So I'll select, since we're on the user training, I'll go with agenda manager training. We would select a creator. The creator is just, if you look in the bottom right here, it's just the system tracks who creates an item. So do you want it to still list the current creator, or do you want it to be someone different for the other agenda? Now, under content to copy and copy options, it can be hard to remember what each of these are. So my recommendation is that you just copy all of them. Fields is going to carry over all of the fields you filled out on this items fields page, so you don't have to refill those out. Files is going to copy over all of the attachments. Approvals would copy over approval workflows. If there are none, you're fine. You can still select it. It won't do anything. Keep current item ID. We had talked about that system generated item ID here. It's really just kind of the system's way of tracking the item. So it can be nice to keep it as the current item ID if it really is the same topic. So if you're talking about, you know, for example, purchasing Select to manage your agendas and meetings, you could have that on 2 agendas. It's really the same item, even if it is being talked about twice. So then the system treats it as that. Regenerating item reports. This is going to make sure that if you made any changes to these fields but didn't regenerate your item report, it'll make sure that the updated fields do get placed on that report. And then updating the item layout, not something super important since we don't have a ton of varied designs within the system, but I do recommend getting in the habit of selecting that, because you are going to want to make sure that if new designs do get put in the system, you want the item to match the agenda it's being copied to. So if you're copying it maybe from like a committee agenda to the select board, and those 2 board agendas have different designs, you just want to make sure it's being changed to the design to match where it's being copied to. So that gives you some insight into what those are. But again, my recommendation is just try to remember to select all 6 of those. All right, at the bottom, the last couple of things you can do, you can change the name before you copy the item over. You could update the category. So maybe it was a presentation on this agenda and it's going to be an action item on the next. And then you would select where on the agenda you want it to go. So do you want it to go under miscellaneous? Do you want it to go under announcements? Wherever you're wanting to copy that over to. So any questions about the copy tool or anything on this page here? All righty. I'll click into move as well. This is a very similar action, but rather than duplicating the item and having it on multiple agendas, this would be used in the instance that you need to move the entire item. So maybe you just added it to the wrong agenda. That could be a reason to move it. Or maybe you've determined you're missing some supporting documentation, or maybe there's just not going to be time to discuss the item and it's a lower priority item. So you need to move it on to next month. So what you would do is you would come into this move page. Again, you're going to select the agenda you want to move it to. I would select both of these because, again, that's pulling over the most updated item report information as well as changing the layout to match the design of the agenda it's being moved to. Now, the reason there's less options here is because the system is assuming that if you're moving an item, you'd like to move over the attachments, you'd like to move over the field, so it's automatically going to move all of that. The message box here, this is just an internal note. So maybe you're moving it to an agenda that's managed by someone different. So you can just provide some context for why the item is being moved. And then down below, again, you can change the name or select where you want it to move to. So what section on that agenda do you want to place it? So very similar to copy, just a few less options, but again, just preventing you from having to do duplicative work. Any questions there? Alrighty. So I know that was really everything as far as kind of managing your items, getting those items added. So I'll click back out to the agenda so we can kind of see the item added there. And then I'll kind of show you how you can access it. And then we will also just quickly show the public portal. I know Lisa had asked if we could see how it displays in there for the public, so I'm happy to show that as well. There we go. Okay. So if we click back out to kind of that main agenda page, you can see that our test item is listed there. Shows a couple of other things. It shows that there are some attachments there, shows that the item is unlocked still. You can kind of disregard that as well as the approval indicator, just because if you were using approvals, it would become locked. But really, essentially, with your current workflow prior to ever having any approvals, you'll just kind of get the item set up, and then your agenda manager would be responsible for reviewing everything before publishing that agenda. So as far as the responsibilities of that kind of standard user, that would be kind of the process for adding the item. If you needed to come in and make modifications to edit an item, you just click on the item name there and it's going to take you right back into those pages we were just modifying. So pretty easy to access and modify the item as well. Alrighty. Any questions there before I kind of open up the public portal and I can show you how that displays?
I'm missing the left-hand side of your screen on my computer. I don't know if you can make your view smaller, but all I see is a little paperclip and the little lock and the date. Is there something to the left or above?
I'm not is everyone else able to see my full screen? I'm not sure what I can do to modify that.
I'm
Oh,
just wondering
yeah,
if there's
that's really interesting, Lisa. Can you like double click maybe on the video?
what?
Can you like double click on the video or something to enlarge that?
Oh, okay. Now I see the top of it. Oh, I can move it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully that wasn't happening for too long. We'll make sure to share the recording so that if you were maybe missing some of the screen for the training, we'll make sure we get that over to you. All right, so I'm going to show you guys the public portal since we do have an agenda that we had already published. Remember when we were looking at the page with the agendas on it, there was that agenda manager training, and of course things are running a little bit slow here again, but I'm just going to open up your public portal. So we can remove the V8, remove that. So this is what your public portal looks like. So we have a couple of things on here. Before we take you live, we'll of course clean up some of these test meetings. But if you look at the agenda manager training here, we had gone over publishing the agenda, which is something your agenda managers would do. And you can see that compared to the user training, we don't have any icons over here, but you can see on this one that there is an agenda posted, and it does tell you the posting date and time. So great transparency there. And it's also telling us that we have files available to download. So if we click into this meeting, what you can see is that there has been an agenda that has been uploaded or published, as well as a packet. If you click into those kind of hierarchies on the left-hand side, they can scroll between just the agenda itself or the entire packet. And then if you look over here where I had basically done essentially the same exact thing with the same attachments, we have a test item that I had created. And then you can see that there are 3 attachments. We have the item report, which you can click directly into to take a peek at. You can also click directly into the attachments that I had uploaded as well. So that's kind of how it's going to display for the public there. And then of course, listing out any of the names of the items that have those attachments. Since there were only 2 items on this agenda packet, of course, it's just listing those. So a little bit simpler than, of course, a real full agenda would be, but just kind of gives you some insight into what that looks like. And then they are able to download those items as well, either individually or as full agenda or agenda packet. Any questions about that?
James, where is this going to show up if you go to the town website?
So that's something that you guys will be able to determine. We'll share with the project team, like embed information for them to be able to embed the portal. Hard for me to say today for some reason. So for example, here's another customer that we have that has both a website with us as well as the portal. And this is what it can look like when you embed that portal. So they had just created an agendas and minutes page, and then they embedded that public portal there.
Great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? All righty. Well, that's everything we have for our user training today. I really appreciate you all taking the time to join me. Those standard users, you guys can feel free to kind of hop off. And then James and Ben, I didn't know if you guys had any questions or anything you wanted to talk about just regarding the project. I know we have a few minutes, so just wanted to provide, give you my time if you had any questions or concerns.
Uh, sure. I think I'm in good shape right now. I mean, I don't